Did I get together my tacos and my chicken wings? Have I gotten all my beverages and my brews? And if you don't drink, maybe your root beer or your Coke. Did I put together the party and get all the invitations out? Did I gather around and prepare myself for this once a year festivity that I simply don't think gets enough recognition? Well, not from you, not from my people. You happen to know that what day deserves more recognition than this one? Columbus Day. Well, if you haven't gotten your party started, I've got some great news. You don't have to watch the football game. You don't have to read a good book. You don't even have to start a fire. You don't need to do any of those things. Just gather all your friends up that you got together for Columbus Day wearing their favorite Columbus artifacts. Turn up the volume. Turn the bright up nice and glowy. And sure enough, sit back, relax, and realize why, if I'm not mistaken, this is Brad Stine Has Issues. Hey, it's God's comic, Brad Stine, and it is Brad Stine Has Issues, where comedy, conservatism, and Christianity collide in a cacophony of clarity. Speaking of clarity, my son Wyatt's behind the board. Wyatt, how you doing today, son?
Well, my cough isn't gone completely,
Yeah.
but I can talk without sounding like I'm choking to death, so that's a plus.
That's a very much plus. And you know what? If I'm not mistaken, at Lowe's, they have tracheotomy equipment. They have a surgical gear that you can use to do personal surgery on your vocal cords and or your lungs. So that's what I'm curious about. Did you use some of your Lowe's discounts as well as your knowledge to find yourself instruments that allow you to heal up your lungs?
Yeah, I did. A lot of cool stuff, actually. So you know how, like, paint has those, like, respirator masks you can wear?
Yes.
But it turns out that the heavy-duty industrial strength stuff does wonders on your trachea.
Wow. So you just breathe it in for a while?
Oh,
and
I inhaled that stuff. Like,
man.
Oh, and it was like, it was that old-timey, like, 1960s, 50s stuff. It had this, like, wonder chemical, like, asbestos or something.
Asbestos?
Yeah, something like that. So, yeah, my cough has been fine ever since then.
Why did you call it the 60s old-timey? Because, you know, I was born in the 60s. So. I think that was the cough gods getting back at you.
The 60s were 80 years ago.
They really weren't, son. They really weren't. Or I'd be in my 80s.
No, wait,
Listen.
sorry, 60 years ago.
Yeah.
I forgot how numbers work briefly. I think that's the cough doing that to me.
Wyatt, is it me or did Clara Beatty come in number one?
I got Karen Boyd.
What?
Yeah.
Why
and then that was
don't
a close
my
second.
things ever connect? All I see is Clara
It
Beatty.
has to do with the fact that Facebook decides to wait a solid minute or two before actually letting anyone join the stream. So I don't know why they do that.
I don't either. Well, I got a Clara Beatty, but even if she wasn't first, God bless you, love you, glad you're here. Bebheim McNenoman, he's here. Paula Faye Marie Rout, she's here. Why wouldn't she be? She's got 4 names. Kathy Simpson says hi. Sean Syriac's here. Darn 6 today. Laugh out loud. James Lyons is here. Guess who else is there? Rebecca Daly Dwyer. She always shows up. You know why? Because she's from Belafonte, Pennsylvania. You know what they have to do on Monday nights in Belafonte, Pennsylvania, son?
Nothing.
Exactly. Let's see. Marcia Painter Reed. Good evening from Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Hey, I'm from Indiana. We're Hoosiers. Desi Wilhelm. Dan Graff is here. Mark Bunker. Karen Rochelle. Hey, guys. Images by Outlaw. Evening, y'all. Blessings from Texas. Yes, sir. Kathy Simpson. Way to go, Wyatt. Kathy was praying for you, son. She wanted your cough to get better, and I think she single-handedly made it happen.
Yep.
Louis Leon says, Happy Columbus Day. Nick Kress, I see him finally pop up, and it says asbestos, and then he kind of like smiles like, are you kidding me? Evening, sir, from North Carolina. That's Paul Brown. Danny Herring, she's here. You know, Danny Herring, did you know that Danny Herring invested and donated to our podcast, and I got her book, but she also helped us. So it allows me to, you know, keep growing this podcast into the juggernaut it's become, son.
Yep.
Yeah. Let's see. Who else is there? Oh, she's tuning in on our Canadian Thanksgiving Day. Happy Columbus Day, all. So it's Canadian Thanksgiving. And what do the Canadians have to be thankful for, son? Be honest.
The fact that they're not Florida?
No, because they go to Florida all the time to get away from the horrific Canadian winters. No, what do they have to be? And I don't mean being stereotyped or caricature or be silly.
Yeah.
I'm saying clearly, what do they have to be thankful for? And I think it's obvious: maple syrup.
Okay, that fly in the room is really bugging me.
Isn't it crazy? Karen Boyd said,
that's what they call them, bugs.
yeah, they. Hey, look what Nick Chris said. First on my feed again. So see, he's got something going there. Karen says, thank you, White. She's always grateful that you stick up for her. Forrest Bainey, haha. Karen beat Nick again. Hi, White Brad. Hey, how you doing, Forrest? Joel Bodges is here. Dusty Will might think I'm his name. James Holman, I think so. Let's see. I just want to see if there's anybody. Everett Hornbussel, hey brother, jumping in after our Taekwondo class. Well, thanks for coming in, Everett, and we will be seeing you soon. James Holman, Elena Hutchinson is here. Joel Bogus, Andrew Steve made it this week. Hello, everyone. Danny Willard. So, you know, lots of new folks. David Adams from West Lynn, Oregon. Love the truth. Who doesn't? Keely Nava. Hi from California. And let's see. Danny Herring, cannot wait to read your book. We are thankful for American comedians. Well, thankful. And listen, you guys have had good comedians. Canadians gave us Jim Carrey, and they gave us, let's see.
Rush.
Rush. My son loves Rush. And he's a drummer, so that brings a melancholy, sort of bittersweet flavor to that whole thing.
What else did they give us? Maple syrup. Have we done that joke already? I think we've done that joke already, haven't we?
Which one?
Canadians gave us
I already
maple
said
syrup.
maple syrup. Listen,
okay.
I gotta. Somebody's trying to correct me. Beaving McMenamin says, "I'm a woman. You say my name, Beavin McManim. Okay,
What?
Beavin McManim. Oh well, I keep mispronouncing her name because it's spelled Bebhinn. So I say Beavin, and it's Beavin. So
where's the V in that?
I don't know. Greetings from Mount Eden,
it's
Kentucky's here. That's M.K. McGee.
It's like the genius who came up with the spelling for pterodactyl.
Yeah.
You know, like, why do some words think that they can be fancy smancy and add different letters that don't even mean anything?
I think it's their arrogance, to be perfectly frank, son.
And you know what the most arrogant word of all is then? Q.
Q. Oh.
Q-U-E-U-E.
Because Q butts in a lot of words it does not belong. Clearly, it wasn't satisfied with the little sound it makes. And by the way, the actual Q sound, the qu sound, doesn't even get utilized unless it has U. So actually, its name, its one unique sound, can't even be applied until it applies another letter. So Q.
And you want to know what the best part is?
I don't.
It still has that letter afterwards, and it still feels it's sounding right.
I know. I have to agree. Q is an outlier.
Wait, are we talking about the letter or the word? I can't tell.
Be eliminated. Q needs to be put down.
We only need 25 letters in this alphabet.
Listen, let me tell you something, son. Your name's Wyatt. Now, do people like your name? Do you get a lot of folks?
I would hope so.
I mean, do you get people, oh, I love that name or anything like that?
Not frequently, but it has happened before.
Okay.
More so than I'd assume most other names get called that.
You're welcome. See, folks, if you're brand new to Brad Stine Has Issues, you need to understand that conservatism will be talked about. Comedy will be utilized, hopefully. Who knows? Maybe you won't laugh. Christianity, of course, because it's the truth that tells us how the world works. And it collides in a cacophony of clarity. And what you're listening to, if you're brand new, is that's my son. He's my sidekick. But he didn't come from my side. He came from my loins. And that's why he's here. Think about that. The man you hear, the man that's running this thing, that's making everything work, that's working all the proper levers, that's making this sound beautiful.
The man who, may I remind you, is in control of the buttons.
He is. He loves to say he's in control of the buttons.
Just making sure you remember before you say whatever it is you wanted to say.
I was simply going to say that as much as I can't do this podcast without you, you're getting so good at it. You're learning, you're growing, you're getting better all the time. You're funny. You're my son. You're talented. You're clever.
Okay, get to the end. So
I invented you. You literally wouldn't exist here if it wasn't for me being amorous once to your mother. I know.
Once?
Well. No, you took a few tries. Trust me. Trust me.
Had to make sure everything was right. And you're still wound up with this?
I'm telling you. See, folks, you think I'm always too hard on my son. He does it to himself. He does it to himself. Well, listen.
Anyway, so apparently, going back to that whole name, it's Irish. That BH makes a V sound. Because, of course, if there's one country that I'm taking English advice from, it's Irish.
Okay.
It's the country that doesn't even speak the dang language.
What do they speak?
Irelandish, I guess.
Isn't it Gaelic?
No, I think that's Italian.
Oh, it's... Okay. I'm thinking geography is probably not your number one subject, son. I'm just throwing it out. I don't know. I'm not going to make it.
I have never liked geography. Never cared for it at all.
Because you never knew where you were.
I knew where I was. I just didn't know where I wanted to go. And
Listen,
I still don't.
I appreciate you using your lozenges, but we can't hear you sucking on them, and it's a little disturbing.
Oh.
You hear that?
I don't really know what you're talking about.
I know you don't. Nevertheless.
I'm just trying to not,
but
the mic again.
What was the best word that came out of that little sequence?
Lozenge. Yeah, that's right. We're bringing it back.
I love that word.
Round 2 of the lozenge joke.
Speaking of lozenge, I wanted to ask you guys about Columbus Day. We've had a lot of people that have been coming out lately and disparaging Columbus. Now, Wyatt, have you done a lot of research on why people are anti-Columbus?
I didn't know there'd be a test.
No, I didn't. The whole point is to try to throw you so I can mock you and ridicule you and give myself points as though I'm somebody smarter than you.
Well, in that case, well played.
So you don't know. You don't know what the problem with Columbus is.
Didn't he discover the Aztecs or something?
He discovered America, though. I don't believe he ever made it here. I think he ended up in the West Indies. I think he ended up close to here in, Bahamas?
Isn't it like Cuba or something?
Maybe.
So someplace close by.
Yeah. But the point is, there is a huge sort of backlash towards Columbus and when I say huge, I mean not very much. But if you haven't noticed about the left and about wokeism, it doesn't have to be the majority. It just has to be a vocal lunacy of 2 to get things changed, to bring down statues.
All it takes is 100% of 2% of the population.
But here's the deal. What their problem is there was some slave. In some of the folks he came upon, he used slave labor. Apparently, I haven't honestly done a lot of deep research in Columbus, but that was the big issue when just cursory going through it, that he had used these slaves and that they took the gold and they landed on this country, but it was, hey, there were people here first and they just stole the land. And I just curious if the leftists, the wokest, and they're usually children, so I'm talking about 18, 19-year-olds who just fall for whatever lunacy their left-leaning tenured professor who's never accomplished anything in his life, so he just becomes a tenured professor so he can try to control and manipulate the minds of 18 and 19-year-olds. Makes him feel good about himself because he's a failure. And believes that through the capitalist system that gives him the money, that it makes him to have the freedom to speak without having somebody shoot him. He believes in socialism and Marxism. So this buffoonery, to live in a life that disparages the very freedom you have to disparage the freedom, is so stupid that I don't know how to deal with it. I don't know how to wrap my mind around it. I don't know how these people aren't kicked out, thrown out, and forced to live at least 10 years in a system like North Korea would be a good one, or Uzbekistan, or let's put them in Iran, Iraq. Let's get them in Afghanistan. Let's put them somewhere and force them to live there, and then see if they want to come back. I feel like there comes a point when your ungratefulness has to cost you something. Now look, slavery is a horrible thing. No one will deny that, obviously. Matter of fact, the Bible, the central theme of the Torah, the beginning books, the books of Moses, spoke about the Egyptians escaping slavery, the Israelites escaping slavery from the Egyptians. So it was one of the first, if not the first, ancient manuscript that said slavery was evil. It was bad. It was unjust. It needed to be broken. The reason I say that is because slavery has existed in every nation on every planet by every single human being's ethnicity has participated and been a slave owner or a slave somewhere throughout human history. So this constant battering down of the United States as though they invented slavery, as though it never happened anywhere else. Yes, there were Native Americans and there were Indians here in America. There's no question about there were that. Now, when he got here in 1492, I don't know. Were there Apaches then? Comanches then? I don't know. I don't know enough about it. But I do know this. I do know that those who we claim land was stolen had their own theories of political formulas that was within their system. And one of those systems was power. If you were a tribe that could take land from another tribe, hunting land, grazing land, whatever you want to call it, you won. They gave strength and weight to power, to conquering. There was something about that. You conquered, you won, you're superior. Your medicine man is stronger than ours. Your spells are better. Every one of these Native Americans, for the most part, were slave owners. They captured other Indians, made slaves out of them. They certainly attacked the white settlers, raped, pillaged, butchered, skinned alive, and killed these people. And these are the ones that had this beautiful connection to nature, and had we not spoiled it, we would have lived in a beautiful Stone Age world, literally, where we still could have, looked to the moon for our harvest, and never created shelters that could last, or sewage systems that would get rid of our waste, or any of these things. No. And you might think to yourself, well, so what? Live in the nature, live in these old days, live in those times when things were better and more beautiful and more organic. And there are tribes that still do live like that in this earth. But here's my problem. If you are living in the United States of America, then based on your premise, if you're woke and left, you are living on stolen land. That's what you're saying. You're the one that's bringing it up. So my question to you is very, very, very simple. Do you really believe this land is stolen, or was it simply the way that world has always worked, that somebody comes in and conquers somebody else? I'm not saying it's good or that evil can't come out of that. Don't get me wrong. But it's how the world has always worked. It simply is. So my question is, do you believe that this was stolen land? If you do you believe that possessing stolen land is immoral, and you believe that it should be returned to the people that were here first. Now keep in mind that whoever you return it to stole it from somebody else, and whoever you return that to stole it from somebody else. There was no guy that just sort of started the whole thing that didn't steal it from somebody else, if for nothing else, for the wildlife that was here first, that he encroached on them and started shooting and eating their children. So if you are a leftist and you live on stolen land that you consider to be so immoral, I got a simple solution. Sell your home, sell everything you have, give to the local indigenous people that you live, go live out in the wilderness on your own, or more importantly, leave this land. It's stolen, and you are perpetuating immorality. You are perpetuating this horrible injustice. Get out of this nation. You don't belong here. Do not use any modern conveniences, because the West brought that. All the white man that you despise, we invented most of this stuff. I don't know why. It just happened to be the European creation of modern science and science techniques. Yes, all nations had science to a degree. They did not have this scientific method. That was Renaissance time, medieval time, during what was known as the Dark Ages, was in fact the launching of science as we know it. And it was white European males. It had nothing to do with them being white. It had nothing to them to be males. It had nothing to do with them being Europeans. It had to do with this particular group believed that God Almighty was real and created a natural order, and thus from that we can create and count on the natural world to act in a certain way that allows us to make predictions by which we can create scientific methods so that we can observe the natural world and utilize it to our best benefit, because the Judeo-Christian ethics said that you will have dominion over the earth that God gave you and see what you can create from it, from whole cloth, just like God did. We're recreating what God did and create our own little stuff like cell phones and typewriters and texting and computers and televisions and film and everything that these woke green folks use regularly that pollutes the world, so they can talk about how bad all of the rest of us are for polluting the world. Your exposure of your hypocrisy is so absurd, so ridiculous, it needs to simply be ignored. You're an embarrassment to humans. Start using your logic and reason, follow through completely as you say you believe, or quit talking to us, because you're a hypocrite, you're a liar, and you don't really believe it at all. It just makes you feel good about yourself, because you don't. White, that's my little tribute to Columbus. What do you think?
Wow, that was all you had to say?
That's it, yeah.
I mean, I guess we are kind of running short on time.
Right. Well, listen.
We only have, I don't know, however long you want to do this for, so.
Well, I do it as long as the Spirit leads me, son. And speaking of the Spirit leading.
The spirit of Christopher Columbus?
Yes, he had a spirit, son.
Well, okay, yeah, but like I thought he wouldn't be, you know, spending that afterlife time here, but helping us with the podcast. I thought he'd go out discovering new worlds or whatever, sailing off the edge of the ocean or whatever. I don't know.
You guys, sailing off the edge of the ocean. You guys know that when I do Brad Stine Has Issues, I have constantly experimented with trying to understand who exactly I am and what is the most important elements I should focus on. Because I never wanted a program that simply made fun of ideas that I disagreed with, or mocked the left because I'm a conservative, or mocked atheism because I'm a Christian, or anything along that line. I always wanted to see, is there solutions? Is there ways to counter what's happening in America with the hope that freedom can be restored and remain free, and liberty will rule in this country? So I decided that I wanted to use my righteous indignation, which is what seems to come out of my mouth all the time. I get so frustrated and angry at things, and I want to talk about it, and I feel like that's God telling me to do it. So I saw a whole soliloquy that Ricky Gervais did on his atheism. Remember, he's an advocate and a missionary for atheism. And I found this like 10-minute compilation of Ricky doing and speaking about atheism, why he believes it's true, why he believes it's real, and how stupid anybody that doesn't believe in atheism are. Well, I am a fan of Ricky Gervais. He's a genius. He's a great comic. But the stupidity of atheist arguments just overwhelmed me, and I don't know what to do with it. It is literally the most illogical and unscientific belief system in human history is to be an atheist. It's so foolish and so absurd. If you live your life as though life has meaning, which they do, then you can't be an atheist. That's just simply logical, because atheism is, in conclusion, nihilism. Even Camus realized that, and because of that, he literally said that what we're going to do is we're going to realize life has no meaning. We're not going to act as though it has meaning, which is another idea. I think it was Kantian idea of acting as though there was meaning so that we could survive. But in fact, they say, no, we are going to not fool ourselves into thinking life has meaning. We know it doesn't, so we're going to see it as the absurdity of acting as though life has meaning. And we're going to embrace the absurdity. This is what Camus came up with. This is his way of dealing with the fact that he was a nihilist, had to be, didn't know how to survive, because you can't function. So he said, well, let's embrace the absurdity of it and let that be enough, which means he's trying to find meaning in the meaningless thinking. Somehow he bypassed the fact that you're still trying to land somewhere as though this is valuable. Once again, circumventing and short-circuiting his lack of philosophical acumen, because you can't talk about meaninglessness meaningfully. So, those were the things that bothered me. I've got a clip that I did. It's going to be 3-part series on me, God's Comic versus Ricky Gervais. And some of you might have seen this, because I put the first one out. There's going to be 3. But I'm going to show it to you tonight, because for many of you who haven't seen it, I want you to see what I'm up to. I want you to see what I'm fighting against. For those of you who believe in what I'm doing and want to understand it, in case you want to pray for me. If you want to donate, that's up to you. But it allows me to try to grow this into something, to fight for these ideas of truth and conservative values, conserving the values and the wisdom of the ages, about liberty for all people, free speech for everyone. And the only way we're ever going to get anywhere and fight these ideas is if we expose them for what they are and hope that somebody, not far leftists, they even believe that logic is racist. But for those who are still waffling and trying to understand what is true about reality, maybe I can help persuade them, bring them into the camp of the militia of the mind, which is an idea that we came up with together as we began to speak, and I began to talk to you about what these things are. So I'm going to show you a clip of the God's Comic versus Ricky Gervais. It's about an 18-minute clip, so I told Wyatt, why don't we just cut it in half? We can show the other half next week, and that way we'll have time for the interview, because I do, in fact, decide to bring back FBI agent John Guandolo, because people loved him so much last week that I'm going to do a first. We're going to interview the same guy 2 weeks in a row. So we're going to only go play about half of it, so you can see what I'm up to. And when we get back, folks, we will be doing an interview about the FBI based on what we talked about with John last week, so you can see what's really going on behind the scenes in America, how desperate it is, and how he thinks about what's going on in America, our freedoms, lack thereof, what is the FBI, what's happened to it. Heck, at the end, I even asked him what he thought about the election. This is a guy that knows people on the inside. So, here's my first half clip of my first series, God's Comic versus Ricky Gervais. And when we come back, we will say hi to John Guandolo. Enjoy, folks. Enjoy. Hi, folks. It's God's Comic, Brad Stine, and I am running a 3-part series, God's Comic versus Ricky Gervais. Now, for those of you who don't know who I am, let me do a quick introduction. I am a Christian, a conservative, a patriot, an originalist when it comes to the Constitution, a huge believer in free speech and religious liberties. And all of that ends up in my comedy, which makes me a freak, a unicorn, kind of an outlier. But that's what I do. And in that regard, I've watched my profession and I've watched the arts being completely taken over by the left, and I'm not one of them. So I'm going to fight back to try and make commentary and thoughts and ideas on the culture and in that which means the most to me, this is what free speech is supposed to look like. I've chosen this Ricky Gervais clip because it was about 10 minutes long, and I realized that I could cut it into 3 smaller segments. And it's him, of course, being a missionary towards his atheism. I'm just simply going to comment on my perspective of what he is saying and how I think it might be true, not true, or where we differ. And that's really all this is. I hope it's interesting and maybe insightful, and maybe you'll agree or disagree, but go ahead and engage and go ahead and talk below on the thread, and let's see if we can have a civil discourse. Now, I do want to make this one disclaimer. I want you to know that from my perspective, and I've been doing stand-up comedy for over 30 years, been in over 20 films, written 2 books. I've done a lot of a professional magician, did a lot in the performance arts. So I'm not a novice. And I'm here to say that I believe that Ricky Gervais is absolutely a brilliant comic. If you look at the sitcoms that he has written, from The Office to the sitcom he has on Netflix right now, it's just brilliant. Oh, and Extras was just wonderful. I'm just in awe of how wonderful this guy's creative mind is. Great actor, comic actor, and stand-up comic. So let me go on record. Ricky Gervais is funnier than I will ever be in my lifetime. He is richer than I will ever be in my lifetime. He's more creative than I will ever be in my lifetime. He's more famous than I will be ever in my lifetime. He is successful. And what I really love about him is he is not woke. He despises political correctness. He has called out Hollywood to their face. He goes against the woke and the leftist, the cultural Marxist cancer that's destroying the West. He fights against it. And he has the riches and the fame to be able to do so without being canceled because he's too powerful. So thank God, ironically, for this atheist who stands for the things that he does. So I wanted to preface by saying I'm a fan of Ricky Gervais. So what this commentary is coming from a perspective that will seem odd or maybe even sort of pathetic to any atheist watching this, and that is this. I am actually required by my faith to care about people who don't believe that Jesus is God. I'm required to care about them. I have and will continue to, and this isn't just a metaphor, pray for Ricky Gervais, and I'll tell you why. I want him to go to heaven. He's so funny. He's so wonderful, and I want him to meet the Creator that gave him the skills and the incredible artistic acumen that he has. I want him to be in heaven with me because I think he would be an amazing friend. I will never meet Ricky Gervais. He will never see this. Trust me, I'm nobody. This is for those who, though, know him and maybe know me and might find this interesting. So, as an atheist, he has no obligation to care about me or in any way defend or protect my rights, though I believe he would, based on what I've seen. He definitely believes in free speech. But I, as a Christian, have to care about him and all people's souls. That's what it means to be a Christ follower. You actually believe there's something at stake for not believing in Christ. So, this is my take on this missionary of atheism, Ricky Gervais, who I absolutely think is amazing. So, we're going to take it from here. It'll probably be a 3 sections, or what do you call it, 3 episodes of my commentary to keep it shorter. But I wanted to say this preface so everybody would know how much I admire this guy. So, it's going to be all off the cuff. This isn't rehearsed. There is no script. So, we'll see how it works. Starting now.
Why don't you believe in God?
Why don't I believe in God? Is that the question that they ask atheists? I think it's an interesting question. It's an important question. Why not ask it?
Well, that's a very strange question.
It's not a strange question, Ricky. Actually, it's probably the single most asked question in human history.
Why don't you believe in God? You came up with it.
I didn't come up with it. The belief in God is probably the single oldest belief in human history. Of course, the gods took on different shapes and forms and amounts. Only in the Judeo-Christian monotheistic God do we have the Christian faith and Islam and Judaism. But the belief in God is not something I came up with. It is probably the oldest belief in human history.
Well, why would I? Religion's greatest trick wasn't convincing some people that there was a God who was all-powerful. It was convincing everyone else that you couldn't ridicule the idea.
Not true. Nothing is more ridiculed right now in the world than religion. As a matter of fact, Christians are now the single most persecuted religious group on earth. So obviously they're ridiculed. Obviously they are put down. Certainly by leftism, which takes its roots from Marxism, it despises Christianity because it deals with one idea that leftism simply can't accept, that there's an actual truth out there, irrespective of what they believe.
We're all born atheists.
We're all born atheists? No, we're not. You can't be born an atheist if you don't even know what the word is, let alone the fact that you even know you exist. Don't understand that.
You know, and then that gets changed or enhanced. I mean, there shouldn't even be a word for atheism. It shouldn't exist. Shouldn't need it. There's not a word for not believing in fairies.
No, there's not a word for not believing in fairies because there is not an adult in the world that believes in fairies. Now, that's not actually true. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, a fellow Brit who wrote the amazing Sherlock Holmes, believed in fairies. Actually, there was a famous pictures that some little girls in England took in the 1910s or whatever, putting up paper fairies and saying these were actual fairies they captured, and he believed it. So, other than that outlier, the Sherlock Holmes author, no adult believes in fairies. They don't believe in Santa Claus. They don't believe in the tooth fairy or unicorns or anything else that is clearly provable not to be true and we know came from mythology. God, on the other hand, is probably the single most debated, philosophically examined idea in the history of humanity. And there are incredible thousands of years of deep thinking and study on the proofs that God makes more sense than not God. So fairies and gods are a conflation of categories that aren't even intertwined.
You know? And if people didn't keep inventing these weird, impossible deities, we wouldn't have to go around denying them.
If people didn't go around inventing them, we wouldn't have to go around denying them. Well, you don't have to go around denying them, Ricky. You can not even pay attention to them. As a matter of fact, if you really think that people believe in this illusion, this flying spaghetti monster or this invisible man in the sky, and you really believe that they're deluded, as, you know, well, as I told you guys before, nobody gets to be on Brad Stine Has Issues regularly unless they have something to say that is smarter than me. And that's not hard to do. But when they have a specific expertise and a specific insight, and they happen to be equally important, good friend of mine, so I know their character. I know I've been with them in the trenches. I've been with them in reality, in the quiet time where we just discussed as human beings and men on the trail trying to figure out and working out our salvation with fear and trembling. And if you're a true Christ follower, it's fear and trembling. If you're a true Christ follower, you realize the skin of your teeth has gotten you into this redemptive place that God has given you because of his sacrifice. And so you are grateful and you don't take it for granted and you don't get self-righteous about it. You should be blown away that he chose you. So I know I am. And I know that my guest here, John Guandolo, also is a Christ follower and truly a man of God. John, thank you so much for coming back. I don't know if you're going to eventually expect me to pay you, but I promise you that will never happen.
It's great to be back, and I always appreciate these are great conversations.
Well, and as I said to my people, you are a man of honor and integrity and virtue, and I want that to be shown to other men, other women, other Americans, other freedom fighters. And as I told you in some of the other times you've been with me, I have Australians that watch. I have Irish that watch. I have Canadians that watch. I have South Africans. That's one thing interesting about the internet. You can have this sort of literally worldwide reach, and you're just some guy in your home having no idea what God had in store for you. Because I just wanted to be a comic. That's hard enough, just trying to be funny. But God had bigger plans. And all I did, John, was said, I'll go where you send me. And next thing you know, you end up in a place you never had intended. And I'm sure that's the case with you. I wanted to spend this segment really focusing on the part of your life that is unique. And so, your whole life's unique, but a part of your life that's unique. If I met a guy that was did the first separation of Siamese twins, that would be so interesting to me that I would, even though I know nothing about surgery and don't give a crap about Siamese twins, I would be wanting to talk to those guys because they have this unique perspective. You were an FBI agent, and so that must tell me that you have some insight, some wisdom, and some personal experience with the inner workings of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And that is a government entity. It is part of the United States of America. But as of late, it has seemed to have gone rogue, or at least has agents that have either been compromised through, who knows, China, I don't know, or just their political philosophical belief system has caused them to decide to leverage this institution that was supposed to protect American citizens and literally use it in a way that is anti-American, certainly unconstitutional, and frankly, almost a despotic use of this system to control. This is, John, I don't know if this has always happened, that there's always been CIA guy that was actually working for Russia. It's not unusual to have spies. That's happened throughout history. But there certainly seems to be much more of a control of the FBI by a leftist political parties to try to destroy their political enemies. Sounds like a movie, but I think it's true. So let's just sort of start with that basic premise. FBI, can it be salvaged as is, or does it almost have to be completely abandoned and either started over or just removed from service?
So I think to that direct question, and I think it's a good question, I would say the only way it could be salvaged if there was a significant purging of the Bureau. Significant. I had advocated even prior to Mr. Trump being elected 2016 that everybody above the GS-14 level be fired from the Bureau, which is basically the entire leadership structure. All the SES, everything over GS-14 is pretty much everyone in charge, and that kind of house cleaning. But I also said we need to fire everyone that has a shoulder on their, or a star on their shoulder inside the military in all four branches, because the level of corruption and incompetence at the senior level, where we've been fighting wars for 20 years and nobody can tell us who the enemy is. If that's not a prima facie evidence of the gross criminal negligence and incompetence of our leaders, I don't know what is. And I want to be clear here, in the counterterrorism and counterintelligence divisions, they are so far off track as far as actually identifying the real threats. And my time, I spent a short amount of time, less than 3 months at FBI headquarters in the counterterrorism division at the headquarters level as a supervisor. And I will tell you, it's not that people aren't working hard. It's that there's no strategic vision and no ability to harness or garner and bring together the power that's within the government to focus on real enemies. And so the corruption is so bad that they think white supremacy is the greatest threat and climate change to the republic, which is just, it's nonsense. So that's the first part. I think I go back to one of the things I was asked to do for the Trump camp prior to the 2017 inauguration is what are the biggest issues in the Bureau? And really it's hiring, training, and promoting, which are the most important in any organization. And I'll give an example. I just got something today on my LinkedIn page. Hey, the FBI is hiring. Well, real professional organizations like CIA and FBI around the world, you don't get to apply by going on the internet. You get recruited. That's how professional intelligence organizations, counterterrorism organizations operate. You think China or Cuba or Saudi Arabia or Russia let you send in an online application to apply? No. They look in the military, in law enforcement. They look for sharp people that are going to be loyal and dedicated, and they go and they sit down and have a talk with them. That's how it works.
So how were you approached to join the FBI? How did it work for you?
I did what a lot of people did. I just applied. I went to the local FBI office and applied, and like any bureaucratic job, sadly, I wasn't approached. And I was, there are a lot of things. There are things the FBI does well and the things that they do not do well. And that, in my opinion, is a great problem. I'll just give an example. This is a little bit, let me lift up the dress for your viewers. My first day at the FBI Training Academy, there were 50 of us in the class, 50. And the guy sitting to my left, because you're sitting there alphabetically, was a very seasoned investigator with a police department out in California, really solid individual. And I mean, this guy knew what time it was. This guy had his stuff together. And this woman walks out on stage and, starts telling us, you're the best of the best. You're the cream of the crop in America. We're not here to get rid of you. We're here to show you how to be, we spent a lot of money getting you in the door. You're the best. We don't want to get rid of you. Welcome. And I'm literally in my head, springs are coming out of my head. And I look over at him and he's like, what in the hell? Because in any real training in what I would consider a very serious professional organization, what you do is you walk out on stage and said, if you guys are lucky, 10 of you will be in this room when you graduate. So you need to work to stay here. You need to show hard work and integrity and perseverance, because we're gonna put the screws on you to get to graduation day. And then when people fail things, you need to get rid of them. But you can't, you got people that aren't even passing basic firearms that they're letting graduate from the FBI Academy now. It's disgraceful, because we need more minorities. We need more, the CIA did a major commercial where they had, trans and lesbian people talking about, we're not here we want you here in our organization. Well, remember, LGBTQ, that's not about human rights or equal rights. That's a communist operation. That's a line of operation in the communist movement. And so it's all of this. So my experience in the Bureau, and I have people that I talk to today about what's going on in the FBI today, there were issues when I joined, but today it's much worse, because they are not focused in the counterterrorism and counterintelligence divisions. They're not focused on actually identifying what real movements and international threats there are inside the United States, because clearly they're working with the senior Muslim Brotherhood organizations in the United States. Instead of steamrolling their buildings and putting their leaders in jail and taking their money in their bank accounts, which is what you would expect to happen from a jihadi, from a professional government organization, and how we deal with jihadi organizations. But that's exactly not what they're doing. They're doing the opposite.
So if that is the way you see it and what's going on, and I don't doubt it, because again, that's why I'm asking you, you would certainly be more privy to that information than me. Okay, so if we are literally being, if the FBI is being watered down, or worse, it's being restructured into doing something else outside of what it was supposed to do, it's becoming weaponized against Americans. Who's doing it? So who's running the show? You know, when this whole Corona thing hit, I mean, to me, you know, as I said once before when we were together, it exposed so much. As bad as it was, it exposed a lot to me that I think was important to see. Who's going to comply, who's not, who's going to be cowards, who's going to be courageous, who's going to care about liberty, who's going to give a liberty away. It showed me a lot. But when suddenly what started out immediately as Wuhan virus, and who gives a crap? It came from somewhere, just like the Spanish flu came from, who cares? We're just trying to figure out what happened. Suddenly, oh, we can't say that now. And then you start buying stuff over the internet while you're sitting around with nothing to do. And it all comes from China. And just the stupid comic over here who tries to be a truth teller and certainly tries to have some insight as to what's actually happening. It just, to me, it was quite clear that China certainly, if they're not running this thing, are deeply embedded in the hope of destroying America and controlling America. They don't want to just wipe us. They want to send a bunch of nuclear bombs to kill us. They want to have our oil and our resources and our gold and our farmland and our food and our everything else. So who's doing this? If this is what's happening in the FBI, then it is a plot. It is on purpose. You said communism is definitely part of the agenda of LGBTQ or Marxism, I guess. Frankfurt School certainly comes to mind as to the sexualization of children, the destruction of the family, everything that made the West strong had to be destroyed for them to rebuild it in Marxist terminology and foundation. But is there something else going on, some other nefarious group I'm not aware of that is making this happen? It can't just be ideological by these guys that they grew up in leftist colleges and decided let's implement this into FBI. There has to be somebody pulling the levers. Who would that be?
So let's take those two pieces, if I could, and let's take China and put it on the side for a second. I'll come back to it. Excuse me. And let's talk about who's doing it. I think it's important to remember that what's happened to the FBI, if we look at the 45 goals of the communists, goal 35, I think 34, 35 is to shut down the FBI, dismantle the FBI, because they know. And so all these things happen, many of them as a part of the communist movement, but they use willing people, usually with good intentions. So I'm going to use some very specific examples. Let's talk about women being allowed in certain units in the military and women being allowed in the FBI. I think I have no problem with that, as long as everyone has to adhere to the same standard, right? That's it. Whether it's an investigative standard, a physical standard, a shooting standard, has to be the same. And the women that were the most angry when the FBI started dropping their standards for women so they could have more women, so it seemed more, progressive, the people that were pissed off more than anyone else were the first generation of women that went in the FBI and were given zero slack. And the guys were like, you'll never make it through here because you can't cut it. And the ones that did had something to be truly proud of because they met the standards and they did well, right? but then the standards are lowered because it was never about equality of women and men. Never. These movements, these hostile movements, the issue is never the issue. They do not care about the climate. They do not care about people wrongly imprisoned. They do not care about equal rights between men and women. They don't care about transgender rights. These are tools they use to destroy the culture. Right out of the Frankfurt School, right? Aufgeben Kultur. It is about destroying the culture. That's what all this is about. It's about bringing down the republic using every tool necessary. So there doesn't have to be one guy with a lever. The reason that all of these administrative restrictions have been put on investigators, agents inside the FBI, is to keep them from actually doing their duty. The reason they want to defund police is so that there's chaos in the streets. So there are people at the international level, at the Comintern, working with leadership of the U.S. Communist Party, working with leadership of the Democrat Party. Yes. So there are people that sit in rooms and plan these things. And you don't have to have Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and Barack Obama in the same room with the leaders of BLM and Antifa, although they do that, by the way. I mean, these people openly praise leaders of BLM and Antifa for being freedom fighters. You know, one man's terrorist is another man freedom fighter. Oh, that's a load of crap. It's the truth about what the founding fathers did and what BLM and Antifa did. BLM and Antifa are terrorists whose stated objectives, is to bring down the republic because they're Chinese communists. BLM, Soviet communists, Antifa. That's what these groups are. They don't stand for liberty and freedom. So when we understand that these groups and these individuals have infiltrated the government at all levels. James Comey, as you and I mentioned in the first time we chatted on here in this venue, I mentioned James Comey admitted he was a communist. So how does a communist become the FBI director? If the entire system is corrupt, that's how that happens. And to what I think is your most important point that you mentioned, a complete lack of courage by the people who are supposed to be the guardians of the republic, the Republican Party, which has catastrophically failed. And they're not rhinos. Everything that's happened is because the leadership of the Republican Party wants it to happen. When a Dick Cheney can call Donald Trump, the most dangerous person in America, and a week later his home gets raided, that's not an accident. That's Dick Cheney given the green light. That's how bad it is. That's what we've got to understand, how far down the line we are with this.
So the DOJ, are they the ones that kind of oversee the FBI?
Well, the FBI is a part of the executive branch of government, and the director reports to the attorney general, who reports to the president of the United States. And so let me make this point, because you said it, and I want to kind of, if I could, for 30 seconds, unpack something you said. I call it the power of being fired. When people stand for what's right and what's just, and you force those who oppose you in the system to fire you, that becomes a very powerful node. But everyone's scared to be fired. Many people are scared to be fired. That's why with over, 14,000 FBI agents, so few have forced the FBI to fire them or put them on suspension or do something. Imagine if 5,000 agents did that and just called BS. It would be so powerful, and it would energize millions of Americans to stand firm in their jobs, in the media, for the patriots that are in the media or in Hollywood, because there are patriots there. There are. You know that. And they're afraid, many of them, to speak out, unless you're like a John Voight and you've already made your millions. You can step out and say what you want.
Yeah.
Right. But the people that have only made a couple movies that people, we now know their names, but they're still making a name for them. If they step out, they're going to get, shellacked. And so they know that.
So when you were with the FBI, though, so you would know the internal workings, the day-to-day of it, because, that was your profession. How was the vibe of the FBI at that time? Were people still fairly patriotic? Did they still feel that we were fighting a good fight and we were defending freedom and liberty? And who did they see as the problem? Everybody that works for a company. I've always been kind of self-employed, so I'm not even a good person to respond to this. But most people that work for the higher up, and it keeps going up the ladder, they always moan and complain about, my boss sucks and this and that. But who is always considered within a typical FBI agent the one that is the incompetent, the one that seems to be given the most power and the most control and seems to have the least amount of understanding on how to use it properly? In other words, is the guy on the street a little bit more savvy to what's going on and is more befuddled when he hears some of these edicts come down and he goes, something's wrong, what's going on? And then what do they think internally is going on? I mean, I would think that would cause patriots to rise up and to whistleblow, which we're seeing a few of, but then they're getting in trouble. So I don't even know if that question made sense, but I'm just curious as to how they...
So it did. Let me start with the first part, which is, yes, I was really fortunate to work with some tremendous patriots and great agents, both on the squads that I worked on in the FBI at the Washington field office, people that I worked that were on the SWAT team with me, that some of whom were also, I served together on the different squads I was on. Great patriots, a lot of them former military, former cops, but even the people that came from the civilian world into the Bureau, a lot of them came for those same reasons. They wanted to do something. They wanted to serve, and they thought this was a honorable way to do it. And that's great. What did they think the biggest problem is? I think there was, at least among my peers, there was a pretty unanimous belief that the problem in the FBI is the leadership. And that's it, is the leadership. It's the way they hire people, the way they train people, the way they promote people. And the saddest part about the FBI, I believe, as an organization, is it grossly misuses the talent that it brings in. I mean, the FBI hires a lot of talented people, and I'm not saying that as a self-aggrandizing statement. They bring in good people, and I think they squander it, greatly squander it. They don't promote initiative. They don't reward people for initiative. And the way they promote people, and yes, I know every big organization, if the working guys and gals aren't bitching about leadership, maybe they're not doing something wrong or something right. Good leadership should be, at some level, giving the working guys a hard time, but not in a bad way. So I know that's part of the nature of big organizations. But the way the FBI, let me just say it this way, and I'm not going to say the name, it's a nationally known consulting firm came in, the FBI paid them to come in and study how they promote people. At the end, the guys and gals from this consulting group, a major consulting group, said, if there was the worst possible way to promote people, you guys are doing it. That's what they said about the FBI. And one example is an FBI agent gets to go onto this listing of opening positions and apply for it. So you get to apply to be the supervisor of X squad in your own field office or in other field offices. And if 6 complete jackasses apply, then they take the best of the 6 jackasses. And then they become the leader. Doesn't matter, here are the 6 things you have to have, this time and grade, these kind of, That is a horrible way.
Yeah.
You should be promoting people by sitting down and saying, hey, I recommend this guy and I recommend that guy. And I'll tell you one other funny story. One of the supervisors I worked for, I was privileged to have two supervisors during my almost 13-year career who were two of the best people I knew. These two guys were absolutely amazing. My first supervisor was the best supervisor I had ever even met in the FBI. And that was a complete blessing. This other guy was a combat vet, Marine, and like me, he was a Naval Academy guy, Marine officer. He was a pilot and a tanker, drove tanks. And he told us, sitting at a meeting with all the supervisors at the Washington field office, the agent in charge of the field office said, hey, we're bringing in this Medal of Honor winner from the outside to talk about leadership. And my supervisor, who never held his tongue, said, well, of course we're bringing someone in from the outside. It's the FBI, and we're talking about leadership. So the point is, everyone knew that was an issue, that people were in charge that had no business being in charge. And again, I think FBI Director James Comey, traitor, broke the law, still admitted he was a communist, still not held accountable. Deputy Director Andrew McCabe committed crimes, high crimes, against the President of the United States, unlawfully allowed a FISA application to surveil the President of the United States, his family and staff, nothing. Senior FBI guy Peter Strzok and others know nothing. It's unbelievable. And so you've got yet another horrible director in Christopher Wray. And again, no courage, no real bold leadership. And so that's why I don't have a lot of high hopes that the FBI, they're certainly not going to self-correct. The FBI never self-corrects. Yeah. And by the way, all those leadership recommendations made by this major consulting firm that the FBI paid, none of those changes were implemented. Nothing. It's still the same ridiculous.
Well, I've noticed too, and it's kind of like, even again with the corona, all these horrible decisions that were made that turned out to be, they turned out killing people with the vaccine mandates and so forth. Nobody apologized and whatever. And I mean, the arrogance of it is, well, we've learned, if anything, that left doesn't ever punish themselves, so they have nothing to apologize for. But more importantly, or equally important, not more important, I think if you screwed up, you should pay the price like the rest of us. But I think what appears to me to be even clearer is you don't apologize, because then you have to admit you failed, that you didn't do it right. You made a mistake. And men of valor will say, screw it up, but we figured it out and we're going to do it better. I mean, DeSantis did that. He came back and said, made a couple of mistakes, but all right, now I'm going full bore and we're going to open the state up and blah, blah, blah. And he became a hero. And Kristi Noem had to do it first. A woman had to do it first to show that I'm not shutting down. So men of honor will also admit they made a mistake. So I'm going to leave you with a couple questions, if you don't mind. I have to assume that you have friends still in the FBI. I'm certainly not going to get into that or even ask you that, because I don't want to put you in a position where you could compromise that or even get them to start taking a peek at who's get the phone records for John Guandolo, who's calling them or whatever. But I'm guessing you do. I'm guessing that there's people there that maybe give you some information, some insight as to what's happening. So it's not quite an FBI question, but it's an important question, because the one thing we are looking at is, well, or at least always believed as a Republic, is we can vote the bastards out, to use a phrase. But now we don't know that we can, because we don't know that our votes count. So based on your perspective, do you believe that the presidential election that got Joe Biden in was legit, or do you think it was stolen?
No, there was significant corruption. And we know that. Just the evidence on the table, we know that. And we especially know it based on the response of those we know who are hostile to liberty. You said something a little while ago where you said you have to begin with, are we being told by the truth? Are we being told the truth? And if we know we're being lied to by these people, why would we then trust them going forward?
Yeah.
Which was let me take one step over and just say this. It's why I wrote an article about the Ukraine, that the same people that gave us all these other lies, Trump, Russiagate, Russia collusion, that covered for James Comey, the same people that did that, the same people that said, Trump was doing these things, the same people that attacked good men and women, the same people that kept their mouths shut when people were calling for Supreme Court justices to be killed. They then came together and said, yeah, Ukraine, we got to get all in. As soon as that happened, I knew that Ukraine, there was something wrong there. Well, of course, we know Ukraine was directly involved with our election fraud, with the Trump, Russia collusion nonsense. It was a lie in violation of the law and other things. We know that people openly lied in front of the television cameras. So in the same way, we see the same people laying out a narrative. And so I know, okay, so I know that's a lie, because you lie. That's what you do. You haven't just lied once. You haven't told the truth yet, for the most part. So when you tell me there's no evidence of election fraud, well, I know right off the fact, I've done my own research. My company, Understanding the Threat, helped a state legislature we put together a package for them that we gave them to them and never took credit for it, so that then we gave it to them, listing out, here are just a basic statement of facts of serious corruption. And I personally know the individuals who are the computer people, the cyber experts, the cyber warfare experts, and I've seen the data. I know what it is. It's so locked down, and it is much worse than we know. And the fact that the machines we have are corrupted, the fact that this should be a one-day election in America, paper ballots only, hand-counted votes. That's it. That's it. The only exception are military, overseas, hand votes that are passed through courier back to the United States, hand-to-hand, locked up, and delivered to the appropriate authorities so they can hand count them. That's it. One-day elections. That's it. Not that hard.
Well, that's...
But yes, it is a gross corruption of our election system.
Yeah, obviously everybody knew something didn't smell right, and it certainly, but then, this is the double-edged sword with being a truth teller and a Christ follower who believes in truth is sacrosanct, even if I don't like it. Is you're willing to try to hear what the other side is saying in case I missed it. I don't want to become a conspiracy theorist. I don't want to just whine and complain because I didn't get my way. If I'm wrong, then I have to suck it up like a man and work harder for the next round. But that's always going to be abused and manipulated by those who don't care at all about truth, freedom, liberty, but in fact despise it and want one thing, the power to control you so that they can rule. It's the oldest sin in the book. I will be God. And that's what we're fighting. So we always fight, truth and lies. God bless you, John Guandolo. I pray for you. I know that you've taken a lot of hits in your life and a lot of difficulties and challenges physically, emotionally, spiritually because of what you stand for. But it inspires guys like me to continue to speak the truth the best I can. And if nothing else, my brother, we die like men. We die like warriors, and we die like the truth. Well, God bless you, brother. I will talk to you down the road. I'm sure we will be bringing you on more because you're filled with insight and wisdom, and people love it. And we love to see truth tellers because that's what it means to be a Christ follower. God bless you, brother.
Thank you very much. God bless you.
See you.
I really wish on this Columbus Day that I could have brought you a little bit more optimistic news. But as you can see, why it was important to bring on an ex-FBI agent, someone who actually studies as an expert on counterterrorism and what is happening in America and the West and the free nations to try to destroy our freedom and liberty. And why wouldn't they? If you're trying to control the world, you have to stop the free nations from being free. So, as I've told you guys a million times, I was just a comic that wanted to do comedy. God said, you got more to talk about than that, and I'm going to have you do so. So I'm talking about things that matter to America. And again, I care about Australians being free. I want Canadians to be free. I want South Africans to be free. I want all the China and North Koreans to be free, but I'm responsible for my territory. So I'm trying to bring out people that are interesting, that actually are real, and trying to give us some practical ways that we can go fight with our militia of the mind. Part of the ways we can do that is to continue this podcast, to let it grow, let us get even more interesting guests, more important guests, for me to continue to make these videos that go up against atheism and all the other things that I'm trying to do. I've got my book, Being a Christian Without Being an Idiot, 11 Assumed Truths That Make Us Look Stupid. And as you know, I use these as a way to help promote Stine Has Issues. So for $55 donation, which is quite a hefty donation for a paperback book, but it's a donation to help this fight for America happen, then I will sign the book to whomever you would ask, yourself or to a friend. If Christmas is coming up, if you want to buy a handful of them, it is tax deductible. I am a 501c3 ministry, and I'll sign it and send it to you. It's $55 because it's $5 to send each one. But that money goes into my account that is, like I said, a 501c3. So it allows you to save some money on your taxes, but it allows me to continue a nonprofit and fight for freedoms and free speech. And I'm going to be at different places. I'm going to be in Iowa. Well, actually, on Friday, I'm going to be in Texas with a bunch of new, I think, training for new school, is it school board members? But then I'm going to be in Iowa Saturday performing, and Sunday as well. So go to bradstine.com if you want to see what church I'm going to be in, or where I'm going to be Friday afternoon in Texas. But I also have shows coming up, and am putting together some shows for the end of the month that are going to be in Illinois. I already have 2 of those established. I'm not sure if I got them up on my website. I got to get them up there. But if you're in the Illinois area, I will be there at the end of the month, and we are going to continue to fight. I'm going to fight like a man. I'm going to try to defend our country and our freedoms, and certainly my faith, and continue to believe that Jesus is God, and to talk to you about it. I don't care if you believe it. I don't care if you think it's crazy, and I don't care if you think that religion doesn't belong here. Not only does it belong here, it is literally the only shot we have, and that is to see from a moral standpoint and from a transcendent standpoint what is really happening on earth, and what we need to do to try to redeem it the best we can. Who knows what God has in store? I don't. But I thank you guys for showing up every Monday, and I am looking forward to next Monday. Who knows who we might have on? I don't know. But I'm continually to try to get guests and other people that I think you'll find interesting, and hopefully we entertain you, we inspire you, and provoke some thought, and hopefully marching orders to join the militia of the mind as we fight for freedom. Remember, PC free is liberty. You've got to be politically correct free. Hate it, despise it, never do it, never apologize for truth. And remember, folks, I'm just a comic. I'm just God's comic, Brad Stine. But listen, I've got a little mission, and that is to put the woke back to sleep. God bless you, folks. See you next week.